So I really wasn't going to talk about the Olympics this year because I am absolutely boycotting it. I'm avoiding it wherever I can because I think that we shouldn't be acting as if it can just carry on as normal while Israel is involved. The same thing I did with Eurovision. I just think we have to stop pretending that it's normal for there to be this country participating in, yeah, a sporting event, a singing competition, while they continue to commit a genocide, to continue to commit horrendous war crimes. Like, we have to be raising our voices. And I'm aware, of course, that some people at the Olympics have done that, including athletes who've pulled up Palestinian flags on the podium and things like that, and absolutely commend them. But there's a couple of stories that I have seen that have been coming out of the Olympics that I think are worth discussing and almost calling for a little bit of calm and order on, really. So, first of all, there's the issue of the opening ceremony, in which it is claimed and disputed that the French recreated the Last Supper using drag performers. And the response has been, outraged and offended, and it seems like they've sort of dug around to find like the most conservative end of the Christian spectrum to be mortified by it. But the same response seems to keep coming up and up and up, which is, well, they wouldn't get away with it if it was Islam. Well, Muslims wouldn't stand for this. And I'm like, first of all, no, you're quite right. If they had tried to ridicule the Prophet Muhammad, yes, or whatever other aspect of Islam, there would have been a horrendous backlash. And I would have been against that backlash in the same way that I'm against the backlash that you're engaging in now. Like it's just such a null argument. Somebody else would be offended if I said this to them. Yeah, but like if you think they shouldn't be offended and they shouldn't react, then why are you being offended and reacting? Um, in fact, is this not a golden opportunity to demonstrate the tolerance that you believe your religion has, and the way that it's really important that we don't take these things too seriously, and that we do allow a little bit of ridicule sometimes? And also, like, what is ridiculing about using, men in makeup? Like, is that, like, why is that ridiculing something? That's only ridiculing if you think that's ridiculous, and that is like a cultural attitude that you maybe need to think about why that's such a big issue for you. I'm here in Scotland where men routinely walk around in kilts, which to all intents and purposes are the same shape as skirts. If you go back in history, men were wandering around in tights with cod pieces. The standards of what is and isn't okay are absolutely movable. And it's kind of ridiculous to be telling anybody else how they should express themselves in that sense. And the other one that's come up is this issue of women who wear the hijab not being allowed to compete. And there has quite rightly been some outrage about this, and some people saying, but, many of these women wouldn't be able to compete, are not able to compete without being able to wear it. And I absolutely think, oh my goodness, of course, we should let them wear it. But still, a little bit of calm on the subject. So first of all, it is okay for sports and other events to have a dress code based on what is safe and what is sensible. And the problem with the ban on women competing in hijab is that it doesn't seem to be about that. Yeah, if there was a reason why you can't have your head covered for a particular sport, I'm all ears to hearing it, but it needs to be something that's applied across the board. It needs to be something that's being done for a sensible and reasonable reason, rather than just singling out one group of individuals, right? And secondly, while we are challenging the ruling that women can't perform in hijab, we should also be challenging the laws all around the world that prohibit women from taking their hijabs off. There are so many countries around the world where veiling is compulsory in certain circumstances, in all circumstances, to different levels, and so on and so forth. But like, we should be constantly challenging that. If we're saying no, women must have the choice to wear their hijab if they want to, we should also be saying they must have the choice not to. And that includes being free from cultural and social pressure to dress and look a certain way. And then finally, there is the big issue that's come up with the women's boxing incident. And the immediate response of this woman being, really badly hurt, dropping out, and then the assumption that her opponent is a trans woman, which then turns out not to be true, and the backlash against this, and then the constant speculation about whether she might be intersex, and the reaction to that, pointing out that these allegations always seem to come up when there are particularly brilliant women of colour competing, and there seems to be a defensiveness around white women. And like, first of all, yes, all very valid points. Of course, that is not to say, and this is why I think it's been handled so badly, it's absolutely legitimate to have a conversation about fairness in sport. And when we have categories in sport, of course, the lines of who fits into which category are always going to be open to some contesting and to some challenging. I mean, we see it in the Paralympics, what level of disability qualifies you for which category. We see it in all sports where there's age categories. When does your birthday have to be? What is the line, the cut-off line for being in this team or in this team? And it is unfair if you were born, 15 minutes after the next cut-off line for what age category you're in. It's going to be much easier for you to compete if you happen to have been born 10 seconds after the deadline. And it's absolutely legitimate, firstly, for someone who is lost when they feel that the rules have been changed or that the rules are not being applied in the way that they thought was fair or they expected them to be applied. It's absolutely fair for a competitor to be angry about that. Like, that's fair enough. It's not her fault that the rules seem to have changed and somebody she didn't think she would have to fight, she now has to fight. It's absolutely fair for people to have concerns about what's fair. And if you have those, right, you should write to the people who govern the sport and, and share your views on how it could be done more fairly, more inclusively, making sure that people are able to participate, but also making sure that the rules are in place. I mean, ditto when it comes to which supplements you're allowed to take and which ones are considered controlled substances. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of incidents over the year of people disagreeing about this, people thinking they were the right side of the rules, finding themselves the wrong side of the rules. It's always going to be an issue. But the backlash on that has to be focused on who makes the rules. It cannot be focused on the individual participants, right? The players, the sports people who have followed the rules, who have got themselves qualified for the sport and are then competing to the best of their ability in that sport. Because if those are the rules and you fit the rules, you're just allowed to compete, and it is not your fault if, as a result of that, other people, are unhappy about the situation. It's not your fault. You've done well, you've won your competition, well done to you. Like, you cannot be the focal point of what's going on, and especially not when it then comes down to suddenly people making assumptions, and often incorrect ones, about your medical history or speculating on it. And at the same time, I've seen this backlash towards the Italian woman who withdrew from the boxing match, saying, it serves her right and she entered a boxing match. What did she expect? Of course she's going to get smacked. Like, we should, if somebody is hurt in a sporting competition, we should extend them our sympathy. And of course, our understanding if they feel that they've been hard done to. Like, that sucks and it's tough. And to be sort of gleeful about her being hurt, I think is totally misleading. I think there is a huge issue that extends way, way, way beyond discussion of gender, age, weight category, etc., rules when it comes to boxing. And that is the question of whether we really, really believe that in 2024, violent sports are something that we want to encourage and promote in our society. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Personally, I would ban boxing. For men, for women, for everybody. And I know people are going to respond and say, oh, but it keeps kids out of trouble and off the streets. All the research shows that it doesn't. All the research shows that providing extracurricular activities, yes, sports, yes, fitness, yes, creative expression, all that stuff, great for young people. But the idea that boxing is somehow special and somehow does that job better than anything else, absolutely no scientific basis for that. Why encourage young people to see smacking someone in the face as a fun activity? Let's just move on from there and say we don't do that anymore. And while we're at it, let's make it clear that we don't do genocide anymore and boycott the Olympics entirely while Israel are involved, and anything else that they're involved in, including the purchase of weapons which can be used and which are being used to slaughter innocent civilians. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week. Increasingly, the mainstream media is terrible at informing the public of what is really going on. I'm only able to make these videos because people are generous enough to sponsor me making them, and if you're able to be a part of that, I would hugely appreciate it. It can cost as little as $1 a month, and you'll get loads of fun bonus content and lots of extras from me and my undying gratitude. I also massively appreciate it if you're able to like, share these videos and let people out there know what's going on.